Fantasy is a genre known for its scope, its massive worlds, epic journeys, and high-stakes conflicts that pull you in from page one. But while some fantasy stories focus on the internal struggles of their characters, others are driven by something more external, the plot. In plot-driven fantasy, the story is shaped not by introspection or emotional arcs, but by action, goals, and consequences. The world is moving fast, and the characters are swept up in events far larger than themselves.
That's not to say these stories lack good characters, but the main engine is momentum. There's a problem that it's solving, a war to stop, prophecy to fulfill, or a mystery to unravel. In this video, we're going to break down what makes a plot-driven fantasy work, what makes it distinct, and how to craft stories where every page pulls your reader forward with tension, urgency, and awe. If you love tales of rebellion, chosen ones, ancient curses, and battles that decide the fate of kingdoms, this one is for you. We already had videos here on the channel exploring character-driven fantasy and also world-building-driven fantasy. You can find the link to those in the video description. But now it's time to discuss the plot. Without further ado, let's get to it.
Plot-driven fantasy puts the events of the story at the forefront. It's about what happens, why it matters, and how it builds. These are stories where pacing is everything, and every chapter either escalates the stakes or brings a new twist. The characters are still important, but their arcs are often defined by how they respond to external pressures. Their development is shaped by the events unfolding around them, not the other way around. One of the strengths of plot-driven fantasy is clarity of purpose. Readers know what's at stake early on. Overthrow the empire, recover the ancient artifact, close the portal to hell. This clear goal gives the story a strong sense of direction and momentum. Think of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. There's a heist, a rebellion, a godlike tyrant, and magic systems with rules that fit directly into the plot. Every action taken by the characters has a tangible effect on the world and moves the narrative forward.
Another hallmark of plot-driven fantasy is structure. These stories often follow established patterns. The hero's journey, for example, 3-act structure or mission-based progression. You can feel the build-up towards the climax. The tension increases as conflict grows more complex, and each decision leads to immediate, visible consequences. You're not just watching the characters grow, you're watching a world change. That doesn't have to mean the characters are shallow though. A plot-driven fantasy can still explore powerful themes, sacrifice, loyalty, justice, corruption, but the lens is often zoomed out. The character's personal journey is part of a larger game. They might struggle, grow, or change, but it's in service to the story's forward motion. The emotional beats can still hit harder because they happen in the middle of chaos, during a siege, a betrayal, or a desperate chase across cursed lands.
Pacing is king in plot-driven fantasy. These stories are built like dominoes. One event triggers the next, and the reader is constantly propelled forward. That doesn't mean every chapter is an action scene, but every scene needs to either introduce a new obstacle, reveal a new clue, or raise the stakes. This is where plotting skill really matters. The best plot-driven stories make the reader feel like the story couldn't have unfolded any other way. One great example is The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. The plot revolves around elaborate cons, shifting alliances, and dangerous secrets. Every scene serves the scheme. Every flashback adds new context. There's always a ticking clock, a looming threat, or a trap about to spring. Lynch keeps the reader hooked not just through his characters, but through what's going to happen next. That's the key, forward energy. Plot twists and reveals also play a huge role. You can see this masterfully done in A Song of Ice and Fire, where plot twists are devastatingly efficient as a storytelling device in hindsight. Martin lures readers into a sense of predictability and then shatters expectations in ways that reshape the entire narrative. The most infamous example is The Red Wedding, a shocking twist that flips the script on traditional heroic arcs. So, spoiler alert, Robb Stark, positioned as the noble young king and presumed central figure in a typical fantasy rebellion, is brutally killed along with his mother in a betrayal that permanently alters the balance of power. It's not just a twist for shock value. It reinforces the story's brutal themes about the cost of war, how fragile honor is, and the dangerous unpredictability of politics. These kinds of twists redefine what kind of story you thought you were reading.
What makes Martin's reveals so compelling is how they are deeply embedded in the world building and the long-term narrative arc. The mystery of Jon Snow's parentage, for example, is built across thousands of pages through scattered hints, half-truths, and conflicting accounts. Likewise, characters like Littlefinger or Varys operate in the shadows, and their manipulations of key events only becomes fully understood after the consequences play out. The plot functions like a political chessboard, with each move hitting layers of subtext and misdirection. Readers are rewarded for paying attention, for rereading, for piecing together implications long before they are confirmed. These twists are very effective because they enhance the sense that the world is complex, they propel the plot forward in different ways, and they create the idea that the world is beyond the full control of any one character, making every chapter feel loaded with potential for revelation.
Plot-driven fantasy leans heavily on external conflict. Armies clashing, kingdoms at war, gods interfering in mortal affairs. This is the bread and butter of the genre. The stakes are often global or cosmic, but that doesn't mean internal conflict is absent. Instead, it's integrated into the action. A character might face doubt, grief, or fear, but those emotions are sparked by the events happening outside of them. Take Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings. His internal arc, accepting his destiny and stepping into leadership, is compelling, but it's driven by plot. The Fellowship breaks, the war intensifies, and the ring is moving closer to Mordor. Aragorn's personal decisions matter, but they're shaped by the larger events surrounding him. That's what makes plot-driven arcs satisfying. They show who characters become when the pressure is on. You can also have morally clear characters in plot-driven stories. There is often less emphasis on gray areas and more on right versus wrong. But even in these cases, characters can still be dynamic. They can grow stronger, more determined, more broken. The difference is that we track this change primarily through their action, not just their introspection.
But there's a risk that comes with plot-driven storytelling. When the plot becomes too rigid or prioritized above all else, characters can start to feel like puppets, tools that exist only to serve the story's momentum. Instead of behaving in ways that feel natural or consistent with their personality, they make decisions purely to move the plot forward. This can lead to moments where character choices feel forced, contrived, or emotionally hollow. Readers might feel like they're watching a chess game where each piece is moved as required, but none of them truly seem alive. The story might be gripping on a structural level, but emotionally it doesn't land. This is a criticism often leveled at Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn trilogy, for example. While the plot is undeniably tight and full of clever twists, some readers feel that the characters, especially in the earlier books, can fall into archetypes or act out of convenience rather than emotional truth. Vin's journey, for instance, includes moments of deep growth, but there are also parts where her reactions feel more like plot necessities than genuine responses. Characters may express doubts or fears, but those emotions don't always linger or meaningfully affect the trajectory of their decisions. The result is a story that moves beautifully on the surface, but can occasionally lack the messy, unpredictable texture of real human behavior. In the worst cases, this undermines investment because readers struggle to connect with characters that feel more like narrative devices than fully realized human beings. Next, I want to explore how to build a strong plot-driven fantasy story. But before we do that, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. Every resource on the channel is completely free, including our Discord server. Link for that below, by the way, in the description. So the best way to support us is by just helping us appease the aberration gods. So with that out of the way, let's continue with the video.
To write great plot-driven fantasy, you need more than just a good idea. You need movement. Every story needs momentum, and that comes from conflict, cause and effect, and escalating tension. One practical tip is to ask yourself at the end of every scene, what changed? If the answer is nothing, the scene probably doesn't belong. In plot-driven stories, stasis is death. Something must always be pushing forward. It's also important to design your world in a way that reinforces your plot. The magic system, the setting, the politics, they shouldn't just be set dressing. They should actively drive the story. Think about how Mistborn's allomancy fuels the fight scenes and heists, or how the high storms in Stormlight Archive shape the entire culture. technology, and timeline of events. In plot-driven fantasy, world building and plot are often inseparable. Your characters don't have to be the deepest introspective thinkers, but they do need clear motivations. They need goals, obstacles, and stakes. Give them decisions to make and consequences to face. A well-structured plot puts your characters into situations where they have to act and then live with the fallout. That's what creates momentum and engagement.
So, if you're building your own plot-driven fantasy, here's the key takeaway. Think of your story like a machine. Every gear should turn another. Your world should create problems, your characters should respond to them, and every choice should pull the plot tighter. You need to keep things exciting, but you also need to make sure that everything matters and it's leading somewhere. When your plot, world, and characters are all in sync, you naturally create a sense of satisfaction in story progression in an elegant way. And that's what keeps readers flipping pages long into the night.
Let's think of a common example in the Harry Potter series, which would be primarily plot-driven, with a lot of world-building and character-driven elements as well. It's a good example of a fantasy story that hits all three axes, but what keeps people turning the pages is the unfolding mystery and conflict, not just the character's internal development or the cool world alone. The Harry Potter series is a textbook example of how plot-driven fantasy can create a deeply engaging experience through clear structure, escalating stakes, and a mystery-based narrative. Each book follows a tightly organized sequence of events. Arrival at Hogwarts, uncovering a magical mystery, a climactic confrontation that gives the story a rhythm readers can depend on. From the Sorcerer's Stone to the Deathly Hallows, Harry is constantly reacting to external events, discovering secrets, investigating threats, and being thrust into a larger battle. While there's personal growth, the emotional arcs serve the unfolding plot rather than driving it. This makes the story fast-paced, filled with suspense and highly addictive. Plot twists and reveals are a central tool in Rowling's storytelling. Each book contains carefully planted clues that lead to major revelations. Tom Riddle's diary, Sirius Black's true identity, the existence of Horcruxes, and Snape's final motives. These twists reward close reading and keep the plot moving forward with purpose. Readers are encouraged to piece together information alongside the characters, which builds a sense of immersion and momentum. This approach transforms the story into a kind of magical whodunit, where every chapter adds new questions and answers, pushing the story towards a climactic payoff. Even the magical world building, one of the most beloved aspects of the series, exists in service of the plot. Spells, artifacts, magical rules, and social systems are introduced not just to build atmosphere, but to enable specific plot moments. Polyjuice Potion, Time Turners, Pensives, The Unforgivable Curses, each becomes essential to solving problems, escaping danger, or uncovering secrets. The result is a world that feels alive and expansive, but also functional and plot relevant. Everything the reader learns about the magical world ends up mattering to the story, keeping the pacing tight and the stakes clear.
So when we look at Harry Potter, what we really see is a masterclass in plot-driven storytelling. The heart of the story lies in tightly structured mysteries, dramatic reveals, and fast-paced momentum, supported by immersive world-building and emotionally resonant reactive character arcs. So Harry Potter is not about pausing for deep introspection. It's about solving the next mystery, escaping the next trap, and surviving the next showdown. That's what it makes such a compelling case study in how a plot-first approach can still create unforgettable stories that stick with the readers for life, even though it is not solely plot-driven, right? We still have world-building, character-driven elements as well.
Plot-driven fantasy thrives on momentum, structure, and clarity. It hooks readers with big stakes, keeps them turning pages with mysteries and twists, and delivers payoffs that feel earned through cause and effect. While it may not always linger in emotional introspection, its strength lies in showing how characters respond to escalating pressure and high-impact decisions. When paired with purposeful world building and strong character motivations, plot-driven fantasy can be just as resonant and meaningful as its more introspective counterparts. It reminds us that action and consequence are powerful storytelling tools, and that a well-constructed plot can reveal character just as effectively as a monologue.
So if you're writing plot-driven fantasy, remember this. Your story doesn't have to slow down to have impact. The emotion can live in the action, the character growth can unfold under pressure, the world can be as functional as it is magical. When you design your story with movement, clarity, and consequences in mind, You're not necessarily sacrificing depth, you're creating the kind of experience that grips readers. That's the magic of plot. So that's it for the video today. Let me know in the comments your favorite plot-driven fantasy stories, or if you're a writer, what tricks do you use to keep your plot tight and propulsive? And if you want to go deeper, hop into Loregeist Tavern. This is our free Discord server. You can find a link to that in the video's description or on the channel's page. And again, if you enjoyed this breakdown, give the video a like, subscribe for more deep dives into fantasy writing and storytelling, and I'll see you next time.
Come join our Tavern discussion of fantasy storytelling and world building here at Loregeist. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching, and may your tales be ever epic.